So look at Anthony Ryder from South Lyon, Michigan, recently selected as the Lions 2020 Fan of the Year. He has a passion about sports broadcasting.
With the 112th selection in the 2021 NFL Draft, the Detroit Lions select Amon-Ra St. Brown, wide receiver, USC. One pride, baby! Yeah! What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another Detroit Lions video. Now, the Detroit Lions and the Seattle Seahawks play in week 2 of the NFL season. The Detroit Lions are 1-0. The Seattle Seahawks are 0-1. And yesterday we broke down this game. We broke down the matchups. We broke down what both teams did last week, good and bad, and which team should have the advantage walking into week 2, and which team should be the victor as they leave Ford Field on Sunday. But today, just like last week, I wanted to take a look at a potential game plan for the Detroit Lions. We did this last week with the Kansas City Chiefs, and honestly, it ended up being very similar to what the Detroit Lions did in real life. Now, I'm not saying that I was the cause of the Detroit Lions' successful game plan, but this could give you a very good insight on what you're going to see in week 2 and kind of give you an idea of what the Detroit Lions are looking to do as they take on Seattle. So, taking a look at last week, week 1 of the NFL season, the Seattle defense was not very strong, allowing 426 total yards, 334 passing yards, and 92 rushing yards. Both Tutu Atwell and Puka Nacua had 119 receiving yards on the game as the Seattle Seahawks fell 30-13 at home to the division rival Los Angeles Rams. Now, the Seattle Seahawks offense wasn't much better, as the Seahawks offense only had 180 total yards, 95 passing yards through the air, and only 85 yards on the ground. Now, DK Metcalf did have a very nice touchdown in the corner of the end zone in the first half, while Kenneth Walker averaged 5.3 yards per carry on the ground. Both of them had very solid days, while Geno Smith, while he wasn't being pressured, also looked very strong. But that's the key, is Geno Smith was under a ton of pressure. The wide receiving game wasn't really able to dig them out of a hole. The offensive line really allowed a lot of pressure on Geno Smith, and despite a very strong day per attempt-wise from Kenneth Walker and a strong touchdown from DK Metcalf, the offense really wasn't able to be as successful as the weapons would believe you to have. Now, taking a look at the injury report for this week. Obviously, you got to plan around injuries. You got to plan around who's going to be there and who's not going to be there. And unfortunately for the Seahawks, it seems as though they are going to suffer. It seems as though they are going to suffer from significantly more injuries than the Detroit Lions. Both Devon Witherspoon and Jamal Adams, members of their secondary, were questionable last week. I know Jamal Adams did not play, and although I do believe Devon Witherspoon played, I don't think he had the most prominent role to start. On the Seattle depth chart on ESPN, it does show him as a backup cornerback at this point. I'm not sure what the snap count looked like last week, but he is dealing with an injury as well. And then last week, of course, during the game, both Seattle starting left and right tackles went down. Charles Cross and Abraham Lucas both left the game early, and neither of the backups played particularly well. Now, the Detroit Lions are relatively healthy. As far as we know, there aren't too many injuries to report. However, it is worthy of note that Taylor Decker did leave Kansas City, did walk out of Arrowhead with a boot on, and it was said that he wasn't at practice on Wednesday, or at least wasn't fully able to practice on Wednesday. Now, I don't know if this is going to be a lingering thing. I'm not sure if this is going to be a, long-term outing situation, but it is worthy of note that Taylor Decker did injure his ankle in Arrowhead and did walk out with a boot. Now, getting on to the game plan. For the Detroit Lions, I think offensively, they need to work on the intermediate passing game. Test the linebackers. Bobby Wagner is not a great coverage linebacker anymore. He doesn't have the speed, doesn't have the range to be an elite ball hawk, doesn't really have the ability to be an elite coverage linebacker. He's still very, very smart and still puts himself in good situations, so that's something you do need to be aware of, but he is not the athlete he once was. He's not necessarily the coverage linebacker he used to be, nor is Brooks. Right, both linebackers are very good run and tackle linebackers. Both of them are going to rack up a ton of tackles in this game and especially be very impactful in the running game, but neither one is super impactful in the passing attack, and that is where Puka Nacua and Tutu Atwell did a majority of their damage, was that intermediate passing game. 10, 15 yards down the field, testing the linebackers a little bit under the high secondary, and lean on the offensive line. let the offensive line protect Jared Goff. They didn't give up a single pressure on the right side of the line. Penei Sewell didn't give up a pressure. Halapalomi Vaitai did not give up a pressure. And Frank Ragnow failed to give up a pressure in week 1. 3 of our 5 starting offensive linemen were nearly perfect in Kansas City. So let your offensive line protect you. Seattle's pass rush was very poor and lackluster last week. So let the offensive line protect you. Let Jared Goff scan the field. Let him kind of, work the intermediate, work the short, and maybe take a couple shots. And I think that this is really going to help the Detroit Lions. Amon-Ra St. Brown is a great intermediate receiver, as is Josh Reynolds, as is Marvin Jones. Sam Laporta can be really good. Khalif Raymond is a deep threat, but he also works really well with Yak in ability to run after the catch. Jahmyr Gibbs in the middle of the field, Brock Wright as a middle-of-the-road intermediate pass catcher, right? The Lions don't have their deep threat. They don't have their big play guy in Jameson Williams, but they're really, really good at working the short game. They're really good at working the intermediate game. We saw it a lot last week. We saw it a lot last season. Jared Goff is very good at the intermediate passing game, and he has the weapons that are going to support him and allow him to do that. So if the Detroit Lions can work that intermediate passing game, test the linebackers in coverage, lean on that offensive line to pass protect, I think they will find success offensively. They will be able to get chunk plays. Of course, running the ball is important as well, but the Seattle Seahawks really were a very strong run defense last week, right? They were able to hold the Rams to a very low yards per attempt, and the Rams ran it a lot. They did have 3 rushing touchdowns, but yards per carry was very, very low. I think the Lions still need that element of the rushing attack. Of course, I think David Montgomery should have 15 to 20 carries. Jahmyr Gibbs should have 7 to 10 carries again and a bunch of touches through the air. But I think the most important thing the Lions should be working on this week is that intermediate passing game right around the first down marker, right around that 10, 15, even 20-yard range. That's where the Rams saw a lot of success last week. That's where the Seahawks really struggled to cover. And I think that is where you're going to see the most impactful plays made by the Lions this week. Now, defensively, the Lions need to stop the run, right? Kenneth Walker last week averaged 5.3 yards per carry. Force passing downs for the Detroit Lions. Let that defensive line go after Geno Smith, right? Let Aiden Hutchinson work against a backup tackle. Let James Houston work against a backup tackle. Let Charles Harris and John Kaminsky and Josh Pascal go after the passer and force those passing downs, because that's where the Seattle Seahawks really struggled last week, right? Kenneth Walker was the only consistent part of their offense because the offensive line wasn't doing very good in pass protection. So if you can force those 2nd and 8, 2nd and 10, back them up, you're going to be able to force a lot of pressure and hopefully force a lot of mistakes. The other thing I think the defense really needs to focus on this week is containing the quarterback, right? Patrick Mahomes last week was able to extend a ton of plays on the ground. He had 6 rushes for 45 yards, which on the box score doesn't look incredible, but that is really impressive from a quarterback that isn't really known to be a scrambler, right? Patrick Mahomes is obviously looked at as a passing quarterback, but he does have that escapability, as does Geno Smith. And just like last year, I think Geno Smith is going to look to step up in the pocket, is going to look to run, at over 7 carries last year versus the Lions. That has been a problem. Those scrambling quarterbacks have given Detroit problems. So contain the quarterback, limit the extended plays, and finish plays. Bring the quarterback down. Don't commit penalties. Don't go for big hit sticks. Just get the quarterback down in the backfield. Don't allow them to step up and scramble through the pocket. Don't allow them to pick up yards with their legs. And I think that they'll be able to be very successful on the defensive side of the ball. The rushing attack for Seattle is their bread and butter. They were most successful last year when they rushed the ball successfully, and when they failed to rush the ball successfully, they had a very poor record, especially down the stretch. Kenneth Walker is more of the engine than I think most people realize. Kenneth Walker is the consistent guy. He's the running back that kind of makes the offense go, sets the offense up in easy 2nd and 3rd down territory. So if you can stop him early, put the ball in Geno Smith's hands, and get pressure on the quarterback, I think the Lions will have a very successful day on defense. Now, keys to victory. Kind of talked about it, but just overall, I think that the pass rush versus the offensive line is going to be very important in this game. Last week, the Detroit Lions went up against a very successful Kansas City Chiefs offensive line with guys like Jawan Taylor, a top-paid tackle, Joe Tooney, a top-paid guard, as well as an all-pro center in Creed Humphrey. They were able to get a ton of pressure, and they were able to get to Mahomes several times, but Mahomes obviously was able to escape. That's where the Detroit Lions really need to improve. That QB contained, keeping him in the pocket, and letting the pass rush get home more than just getting pressures. I think Emmanuel Moseley versus DK Metcalf will be a huge part of this game. Assuming Emmanuel Moseley is healthy, which I think most people think he will be, he should be matched up versus DK Metcalf, old NFC East rivals. old NFC West rivals, players that have gone against each other before. Mosley has gone back and forth with DK for the entirety of his career. They've seen each other a lot. They know each other. They have some bad blood. And I do think Mosley will be matched up versus DK because physically he is the most imposing cornerback we have, the biggest size, the best ability to cover a physical receiver like Metcalf. And I think that's why they brought him in, was for receivers like DK. I think the Lions wide receivers are going to be big in this game. Again, like I said, they work the intermediate routes very well. They don't necessarily have the deep ball, but Amon-Ra St. Brown, Josh Reynolds, Marvin Jones, Sam Laporta, Cleve Raymond even are all really good at working the middle intermediate parts of the field, and that's where the DBs really struggled a week ago. I think that is going to be your key to success. And then linebackers versus running backs, filling your gap, getting to spots early, being aggressive, tackling consistently, not missing tackles, and containing Kenneth Walker is the primary key. I think if the Lions stop the run in this game, they will be very, very successful. Last year, Geno Smith had 7 rushes for 49 yards while scoring 48 points on the Detroit Lions defense. Last year, Rashad Penny had 17 carries for 151 yards and 2 touchdowns versus the Detroit Lions. Obviously, they've added a lot of defensive talent. They've added James Houston. They've added Jack Campbell. They've added a lot of members in the secondary, C.J. Gardner-Johnson, Emmanuel Mosley, Cam Sutton. They've added a lot defensively from a talent perspective, but they have to stop the run. They were pretty good at it last week. They didn't have too many big runs from Kansas City. They didn't have too many big plays. I thought the defense played very well in its first outing, but I think this will be a test. Seattle has a lot of playmakers. Seattle has a lot of guys that can get the football and be creative with it. And Kenneth Walker is just as good, if not better, than Rashad Penny. Geno Smith is just as good, if not better, than last year. And if they can't stop the run, if Geno Smith can extend plays with his legs, if Kenneth Walker or Zach Charbonnet is able to break off a couple big runs like last year, it's going to be a very long day for the Detroit defense. But if they can contain it, if they can stop the run early and get after the quarterback, I think they will be very successful. So with that being said, that is all for you guys today. Let me know down in the comments below what you think about the game plan, what you think the Lions should be looking to do, what you think they should be looking to successfully do versus the Seattle Seahawks. Should they look to stop the run, get after the passer? What do you think they should do offensively? I'd be very curious to hear your guys' thoughts and opinions. But with all that being said, that's all I got for you guys today. Thank you all so very much for watching. And until next time, and as always, go Lions.